Hey guys, welcome back on the channel, and I'm very glad to see you again. I just came back from Italy, from Sardinia, a beautiful island, where we had a chance to watch the World Juniors. I was there as a head of a Serbian delegation and the coach, and amongst the guys that I was coaching was Grandmaster Velimir Ivic. You probably heard and remember that guy. He was quarterfinalist in the World Cup 2 years ago, when he was like one of the major surprises in the tournament, beat up Vallejo, Bluebaum, Andreikin, and all these guys. He eventually lost to Fedosev, but doesn't matter. He was one of the main favorites in the tournament, and I just want to show you his game from the last round, where he made a beautiful win in the Slav Botvinnik system, and to show you like the latest trends of this opening. But before I go there, I just want to tell you that the World Junior Champion is from Azerbaijan, Gadim Bailey, and apart from him, second place was Kazakh. What is very interesting, actually, that in the women's competition, also a girl from Azerbaijan won, so it's like total domination of Azeri guys in the World Juniors this year. Congratulations to these guys, and let's just see, in my opinion, a game that is going to show you two important things in modern chess. First one is a great opening preps, and second thing is going to show you how important it is to have initiative in these latest games. And actually, I want to tell you, like, even when you analyze on computers and follow these trends, you should be following and you should be analyzing to somehow adequately find the systems that suit your style. Ivic likes aggressive play, and in the following game, he just opted for famous Botvinnik system, where he sacrifices a piece, then his opponent actually gets the piece back with a very complicated play. He came up with a great novelty, shows like how important is theoretical prep in 21st century, but from another point of view, at some point he's gonna be down a rook, but he was the one who was running I would say initiative in the game, and that's very important. So let's take a look at the game, and then I'll insist on these very important things when it comes to these moments. So let's begin. He was white. His opponent was Norwegian IM 2440. Ivic went for d4. This guy played d5, played c4, and black opted for a famous Slav defense. You have so many options and possibilities to go with here, but absolutely the most common is knight f3. It's a nice one because they shouldn't go with d takes e4, because you immediately want to get the pawn back with e3, and when they defend it, you just go with a4. The point of this is that they cannot defend these pawns because you just take. They cannot take by pawn because you will take the rook, so they gotta take by c-pawn, in which case you play fantastic move b3, which absolutely weakens and breaks the pawn structure in the black's game. So what do I think by this? I actually think that when they take by pawn, you don't take on b3, but you take on b5. That's an important way of breaking the pawns on the queen side, and whoever wants to play b4, whoever wants to to play d4 against the and to play these openings against Slav, you just have to remember to go with bishop b5, and this is how you actually win the pawn on b5, breaking the pawn structure of black like this. So after like knight f3, his opponent went for knight f6. Ivic went for knight c3. For example, in this position, for example, like 12 years ago, when Boris Avrikh made a great opening repertoire with the white pieces, and he was one of those pioneers of an opening repertoire with white pieces, whether it's about e4 or d4. He made about the d4, and one of the lines that he published in his course was against Slav. And at that time, he gave e3. I remember, thanks to his book and his analysis, it became very popular. And for example, I played 24 tournament games with e3. I lost only twice, made 19 wins, and made 3 draws. That's a great score, and nowadays e3 is not as popular as it used to be. You even remember Kramnik against Topalov. Almost every game went like this. Carlsen against Gelfand. Few games went with a3. But Ivic went for knight c3, and he's known as a player who's absolutely familiar with the most modern things in the world of chess and theory. So he went for knight c3. His opponent played e6. That's just one option. And another important crossroad here, and an option for black, could be d takes c4, where they grab the pawn. They want to defend the pawn on c4 by defending it with the pawn on b5. So you gotta play a4 to prevent b5. And they have two possibilities: to go with e6, in which case you immediately want to get the pawn back with the bishop c4, and absolutely the main line is bishop c4, bishop takes, you take by pawn, and for the rest of the game you have to know the principles and plans how to treat this position with an IQP. And usually they go bishop e7, you go castles, they go knight c6, you go rook e1, they go castles, and the point of this position is that you just want to go with some bishop g5, while your opponent just wants to take some sort of, for example, control on d5, because we all know that when they play against the IQP, they just want to go with blockade and to trade off pieces. And when you play with an IQP, you don't want to exchange pieces, and you just want to run the action and possibly the attack on the king side in this position. And this would be a way to trade those positions. Although, if a4 and bishop f5 instead of e6, you have possibility to go with e3 and to get the pawn back, which was massively used in those matches between Anand and his opponents for the World Championship title, or for example, Karpov at that time, or in some other variations, you can just go with knight e5. Knight e5 is a more modern option, and I believe knight e5 is at least more dangerous, in my opinion, than e3, but e3, if you ask me, is probably more solid. So in the game after knight c3, black went for e6. And we already have like Meran defense if white goes with e3 and black goes with the knight bd7. All that black wants to do here is to wait for white to commit himself with the bishop on e2 or d3, then to take on c4, and then to go with a move like b5, which goes into the deep waters of the Meran defense, where they go with a6, bishop b7, and c5, or where they go after bishop d3 with bishop b7, and at some point they still want to go with for a move like a6 in order to be able to break with c5, or some other players like to do b4, in which case you just go with knight e4, and eventually their idea will be definitely to break somehow with c5 sooner or later, but that has to be their idea, and that has to be the reaction they're gonna go for. So in this case, Ivic opted for, once again, most critical move in these positions, and that goes into severe complications: bishop g5. After he did bishop g5, black could play h6, which leads to a Moscow variation where you take on f6, and after queen f6 you play 3. So what's the whole point of these positions? You play with a pretty solid center. Well, they play a bishop here, but they have this bishop on c8 that doesn't look that good. Also, the dark square bishop in these positions go usually on g6, bishop g7, then they go east, short castle, put a rook on d8, and play knight d7, knight f8, while the light square bishop, so they play castle, knight d7, knight f8, this rook from f8 goes to d8, while the bishop goes on d7 and on e8. It's a famous from I don't know, 30 years ago when Anand played against Gelfand and Predrag Nikolic, and those were some very nice examples of how should these positions be treated with either white or black pieces. Also, there is another topical variation with bishop h4, where they just kick the bishop away with after d takes e4, e4 with g5, and in these positions they just play a game like this. They're up a pawn, we got a kind of shaky but strong center, good activity of our pieces, and the game is like very complicated. All things considered, after bishop g5, black went with d takes c4, and there we go. We're into the semi-Slav Botvinnik system, very famous, known as crazy theoretical and at the same time crazy sharp opening. So take a look at this one, because you will see very unexpected strong novelty by white, and from another point of view, how important, just once again I have to repeat, is theoretical preparation nowadays in chess. He played e4, wants to get a pawn back immediately with a strong center. Black went with b5 in this position, and after he played b5 to defend the pawn, Ivic went with e5. He just takes advantage of having the strong bishop, and that's why black has to chase it away with h6. White has to put a bishop back on h4, and black has to go with g5, chasing this bishop away and at the same time defending the knight on f6. Here, white in the past tried so many options, such as e takes f6, and it turns out to be bad because pawn on f6 is gonna die, and from another point of view, black just won the bishop pair. There is also a line with the bishop g3, in which case black installs his knight into the center of the board, knight e5, and just wants to play bishop b5 or solidify himself with knight d7 or bishop b7, and black is just good. So that's why you just have to sack the knight on g5 here. Practically it's the only move, and when they take, you take back with the bishop on g5. That's why many people consider this variation crazy theoretical and at the same time pretty much difficult for learning, because they have this bishop on g5, they want to get the pawn, knight actually on f6, and they already took like 2 pawns. But did they take like 2 pawns? No, they won the pawn on c4. So at the moment, white is only up a pawn. So black goes with knight bd7 to defend and connect these knights, and white goes with g3. You still don't have to take this knight on f6, you gotta take it once they move the queen. So after bishop b7, black just wants to break with c5 and harass this rook. White goes with bishop g2 and queen b6. The point of queen b6, it is to support the bishop on b7 and c5 push, to give long castle, to of course try to at the moment you're just trying to save your piece and jump with the knight on d5, which means that he's removing the queen from the pin, and sometimes it even supports b4. This is the moment where white has to take the knight on f6 and to say, okay, let's see what's happening on the board. After long castles, short castles, this is a critical position for this variation, and it happens so many times in the past. And here, practically everyone nowadays go with c5, breaking the center, opening up the bishop, and black just wants to take the open h file. Black just wants to take the diagonal with this bishop. Black just wants to take somehow queen being exposed on d1 and having like some sort of attack on the d4 pawn. It's a critical moment of the game, and what has to be very concrete in the situation. There were so many other options. For example, they can go with bishop h6, in which case you definitely have to take on h6, play some queen d2 with lots of other difficulties in these positions. They cannot take because of knight e4. There is also a line with knight e5, a very interesting option where you just sack the queen. So when they play rook to d1, you just go rook a to d1 with a fantastic initiative. And this line is known as winning for white. You just have to learn your analysis after 94, and that's it. So all things considered, they just have to go with c5. It's a modern move. Everybody nowadays plays like this, and Ivic went with d5. Why d5? He keeps tension in the center. He wants to keep the bishop on g2, and from another point of view, he wants to fight against possibly weak bishop on b7. Still, this position is known as theoretically very, very common in practice, and black went for b4. Reminds me a bit of a dragon because it's crazy sharp, but it's 15th move, and still all these moves are more or less known. And here, Ivic comes up with his great novelty and theoretically important moment of this game. So what does he do here? Main move is knight a4. And that's the main move. So after queen b5, you just go with some a3, trying to open the a file, trying to take on b4, eventually to defend the knight on a4 by the rook on a1, and to be able to release your queen. You have problems with a shaky center, pawn on d5, lots of pins, and position is crazy. Instead of going into these lines, Ivic decides to go with very unexpected novelty here, rook to e1. A beautiful move that pressures the pawn on e6, but wait a sec. He's just sacrificing a knight on c3, right? So his Norwegian opponent takes on c3, and Ivic recaptures. Now he's got an open threat of rook b1, going after the queen on b6 and bishop on b7. And since this was a critical moment of the game, and since black threatens rook b1 followed by some rook b7 ideas, black plays practically only move, pushing that pawn up to e5. It goes on e5 and says, okay, I'm up a piece. I just need one or maybe maximum two moves to defend myself, and I'm about to win this game very easily. Ivic goes with rook b1. And after he plays rook b1, his opponent went with this queen on a6. Everyone can say, wait a sec. He's down a piece. Pawn on d5 is kind of, like could be find itself under the attack at some point. Knight on f6 is possibly weak. Wait a sec. They can play bishop h6 or bishop d6 and everything to block everything, to stop further activity of the bishop on g2, and this is kind of important moment of the game. So for all of you who would like to practice initiative and game on some sort of attack in your chess, you just have to pause the video here and ask yourself, what would you do here? Ivic came up with another great continuation of his attack. He sacrifices exchange, and he's now clearly down a rook. For what? After queen b7, he pushes his pawn on d6 in order to open up this monster, bishop on g2. His opponent went with the queen a6, and Ivic went with queen d5. We gotta stop here to see what is it all about and to calculate material in this position. So what does he have? He's got a bishop pair. He's got, like, at a moment 7 pawns against 5 pawns, which basically means that he's got only 2 pawns for the rook. What does he have in return? He's got very nasty threats on a8 and possibly on b7. So black can never take on d6 because they're just going to get mated with the queen b7. That's why his opponent captured on d6 and said, okay, I'm up a rook. I even get 1 more pawn, so you only have a rook a pawn for the rook. Which goes with a rook b1, which is so logical and such a natural move, I'd say, here in this position. And black goes with knight b6. Okay, sometimes you just have to be materialistically oriented, so he takes on f7. It's very important that black doesn't have time to take on a2 because mate is always in the air. His opponent went with the rook d7, and he goes with the queen on g6. Having the queen on g6 is very important because it defends the rook. It always gives you a possibility to go with this queen on a4. And it also supports some f7, queen g8, or simply f7 ideas. I would like to stop here once again and show you how in modern chess, it's not only important to know the theory, but also here you're clearly down a rook, but you have a very nice initiative. Why? Thanks to the bishop pair, thanks to 4 pawns on the king side that can be pushed very nicely, and finally, thanks to these open bishops, lots of these pawns, and eventually initiative that is almost unstoppable here. So after queen g6, black takes on a2. White goes with queen a4, so he sets the battery, and in some moments he would like to go with some checks. At the moment he can't do it because of these two defenders, so white is just dreaming of these two squares. Also queen on e4, watch this out, defends the rook on b6, and possibly he just wants to go with some queen c6 ideas, and at the moment that's the only good and reliable square where you can base your some nasty checks and moments of this game. Also keep in mind the rook on b1 is hanging, so if you ask me if it's white's turn and your question is what is white supposed to do here, white probably should be going with h4, opening up the back rank, connecting these pawns, start pushing these pawns, giving himself some bishop h3 ideas, but slowly but surely you can just positionally play this game, even being down a rook, because he can barely or he cannot even stop these pawns and their further push. So after bishop b8, Ivic goes with h4. It's just one of the possibilities. Queen c6 check was another possibility, where after rook c7 he's got this check. King cannot escape here because of monster bishop, and after this one you can just finish your opponent off, for example, with one very nasty check. He could have finished him like this, but he would have to play like knight d7, and that just involves another type of the game where he can finish his opponent off because rook is hanging, so you can just have fun with these positions, practicing calculation afterwards at home. He played natural move. You don't need to ask always yourself to play the best moves. He just plays natural h4, and his opponent cracked down under severe initiative and pressure during the game. He knew he was under homemade preps. He knew and felt during the game how uncomfortable his position was, and then he played rook to d3. He's disconnecting rook and queen and threatening to take the rook on b1, although Ivic came up with check, and after king d8 delivered checkmate on f7. Quite a nice game, and once again shows an importance of theoretical preps, latest trends in semi-Slav, Botvinnik system, and finally how initiative is important in chess even though you're down a rook. Hope you enjoyed this analysis, and see you very soon. Bye bye, guys.